it comes down for me, I have the strongest concern about the economic development impact, and to recognize that the two largest employers in the state of Colorado is the University of Colorado system, as well as Fort Carson. I believe Fort Carson being number one, University of Colorado being either 2 or 3. And having heard from University of Colorado, having heard from our military leaders, both acting and retirees, and then you add to that, we've been implored by District 11, District 2, certainly the mayor, the Business Alliance, the Lodging Association, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the medical community. Today we had from Gazette editorial, we've heard from the police chief and the fire chief, and certainly our neighbors. To me, for us to move forward with this is not a responsible move from an economic development point of view, and I think there's extreme risk. And with that in mind, I move the approval of the opt-out ordinance and ordinance amending Part 1 of Article 3 of Chapter 2 of the Code of the City of Colorado Springs 2001 as amended pertaining to the growing and selling of retail marijuana.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. So, council, if you want to initiate a discussion about the ordinance that is before us, now's the time to do so. Councilmember Meyer.
Sure, I've been through this many times before, so I'm glad to kick us off. I just want to start by saying I think number one on my list is that the voters voted for this. As an elected official myself, I really don't have, I just couldn't imagine making a decision that goes against what the voters of not only Colorado, but the city of Colorado Springs wanted. I'm going to be a little bit frank, and I just wrote down comments that people made today that sort of jumped out at me as I was thinking about this. Someone mentioned about the question isn't if, but the question really is when. And I agree with that because I do believe the voters have already spoken. So it's not if we do this, it's when we do this. I don't know if any of the rest of you noticed today, but I really see that this is a generational issue. I see many of the younger people in our community not threatened by this. Actually look forward to opening up and regulating this for our community. Someone said banning it won't prevent people from smoking it. And I really do believe that. You know, we've watched our prison system in Colorado grow and grow and grow. And how many of those are in prison just for minor violations of marijuana? For me, it's just long overdue. We're not serving our city or our state well by continuing fighting this. And I do believe, as someone else mentioned, that this is, we're going to see more and more states actually voting to regulate marijuana. I do believe that. Someone said this is less harmful than alcohol. Someone else said this is harder for 18-year-olds to get when it's regulated than it is when it's on the black market. And I think they're right about that. Those of us that worry about this getting into the kids' hands. I said to somebody the other day who mentioned they're worried about their children. I said, well, do their children walk into a liquor store and get a drink? Or if their kids want a drink, they're going to find a drink. They're probably not going to get it in the liquor store, though. And I don't think opening these marijuana up in the community with strict regulations is going to keep kids who want to get their hands on it from getting it. Opt-out is designed for those cities who voted against it. Someone who served, Bob Wiley maybe, someone who served on the committee that actually put together Amendment 64 said the reason the opt-out for cities was in there was for the cities who voted against marijuana, allowing marijuana. We aren't one of those cities. Our city voted to opt in to marijuana. I don't know if this will be a jobs creator. Honestly, don't. But I also don't know if it'll be a jobs cutter. And I think we've seen with medical marijuana that yes, it did create jobs. So I have no reason to believe that that wouldn't be the same with recreational marijuana. Someone made the statement that they're not saying this is a panacea, but at least we're trying something new. And isn't there truth in that? We have spent my lifetime fighting against marijuana. I was in college to become a teacher, and I remember in my college classes being told if I ever smoked marijuana, I would never teach a day in my life. We have spent a generation fighting against this. It really is it's safer than alcohol. And the fact that we continue to push against it, I think really shows our unwillingness to open up and see what other options are. And finally, I just want to say, from my perspective, Colorado Springs actually has an opportunity to be a leader here. We did it with medical marijuana. Cities all over the state looked to us and our regulating system that we had put in place of how to do medical marijuana. We have an opportunity to be the leader in Colorado and create regulations that work for cities. We can be as stringent as we want in those regulations. We could be as loose as we want. And I talked the other day to a gentleman who has a business who can determine potency in marijuana. Wouldn't it be nice, when you go into a liquor store to buy alcohol, you know the content of alcohol that's in the bottles that you're buying. Wouldn't it be nice if we required that we had potency ratings on all of the marijuana? We have the opportunity to design and create our own set of regulations that work for the city of Colorado Springs. We can create setbacks as far as we want from schools or churches or whatever land use we have in mind. So this is my speech for today. I won't repeat it again if we get through and talk about the moratorium. But I just really think this is an opportunity for our city to be a leader. And I think it's an opportunity for us to try something different. Let's not be afraid. Let's go try something different and see if we can figure out the best way to regulate marijuana in Colorado Springs.
We're not going to clap after each one of these. We're going to remain respectful, which we have done throughout this entire hearing, so please. We all have strong feelings about this issue, and we all respect each other's positions, so we thank you for doing that. Councilmember Davis.
I'll be very brief because I think Councilmember Martin was very powerful in her comments. I have already spoken at length about honoring the will of the voters, so I won't belabor that point today, but I do want to speak briefly about something the mayor discussed, which is our neighbors. You mentioned a few of our neighbors. I would like to discuss a couple of our other neighbors along the Front Range, and that's both Pueblo and Denver. Both of these cities plan to regulate, and that means our residents will be able to drive to these very close by locales, purchase their marijuana products, and come back home to use it. Pueblo County Commissioner Sal Pace is quoted as saying, and most of us met him today, "From our perspective, the more of our neighbors who opt out, the more tax revenue for us. If Colorado Springs and El Paso County opt out, we think there is a really significant business opportunity." And I completely agree with that. And many people don't think that business opportunity is worthwhile, but I believe it very much is. There was an article in the paper, which several of you mentioned, it was in the paper just a few days ago, about how Colorado Springs is one of the few Colorado cities that isn't turning around very well from the economic downturn. The cities that I mentioned are turning around. We want to bring economic development to the city. How are we going to do that? We want to bring businesses to this city. We want them to want to come here. We can do that by having a vibrant community, a vibrant downtown, an educated young professional work pool. We can do this by having a vibrant community. We will do that if we're progressive and we're forward-thinking. Councilmember Martin is right. It was powerful today to see the people that came to speak before us. The younger generation has a vision. They have a vision of what our city can be like. We can go with the status quo, or we can try to move forward and do something different and something special. We could be the first city to do it in the state of Colorado. I would love for us to be that city.
Thank you. No topic, please. Okay. Any comments from Councilmember Pico?
Well, there's a couple things that I want to touch on here. I spoke last time. I'll try not to repeat that. One thing that came up here today was some of the discussions of the impact on the military and potential BRAC. And there were quite a few people who said, nah, it's not going to happen. The military will never leave here. The investment is too great. I would suggest that you don't know the military very well if you think that, because quite frankly, the military is mobile. I've come right on deployment from one base, and halfway through the deployment, told we're not going back there, we're going someplace else. And that's not uncommon. I've seen the headquarters leave Colorado Springs before and move out. There's only a handful of the infrastructure in Colorado Springs is at all unique. That's kind of limited to Cheyenne Mountain and Trigger, and everything else is pretty much on the table, including Fort Carson. The base may stay open and might be used to stage training units for high altitude training, but they won't stay here. So, I mean, that's the fact of life. That's what the military is. So I think it is a significant risk. Another point is that it regains, sale and distribution of marijuana remains a felony under federal criminal law. And I have a hard time saying that we're going to go against that at this point in time. So far as those respecting the voice of the voters and the people, I just remind that 3 of the 6 districts here in Colorado Springs did vote against it. In my district, the margin was twice the margin against Amendment 64 as the city as a whole voted for it. That's a fairly significant margin. The precincts within my district, only 4 out of 20 voted for Amendment 64. That's a pretty significant thing. So I absolutely will respect the vote of the people in District 6 and ensure their voice is heard in this discussion. However the vote goes today, and right now I don't know what it is, but I'll continue to vote for it. Thank you.
Other comments? Councilmember Miller.
I echo Councilmember Pico. For 25 years, I put my hand in the air to take an oath of office to support and defend the Constitution. Article 6 of the Constitution holds that federal law is supreme. Unless there is an obvious constitutional violation of federal law, it trumps the law of the states. And until the state-federal conflict is resolved, I can't support legislation or activity which would violate federal law. Furthermore, on the idea of supporting the vote of the people, the whole reason we're here having this discussion is because that's what's happening. The ballot language for Amendment 64 permits local governments to regulate or prohibit such facilities. And as much as I respect Mr. Wiley's discussion of what was intended, that's not what the people of Colorado voted for. What they voted for is knowing, and I would suggest that there are some who voted for it, knowing that the city of Colorado Springs would never opt in. Honestly. So to say that this is a absolute vote of the people to do this, what people voted for and what passed in Colorado Springs and throughout the state of Colorado was ballot language that permitted local governments to regulate or prohibit such facilities. So I'm honoring that, and that's how I'll be going with that. With regards to kids, and beyond the constitutional provision, which really, in airplane terms, is the chocks don't even get removed. The airplane's not even leaving the gate. but I will comment on kids, because I think that's a huge thing. Dealers for kids are here. Kids can get marijuana from dealers, and it's a very dangerous situation because that's how we elevate. Who thinks that the dealers that are getting customers, kids, are going to just disappear because there's retail establishments? I don't think so. But what kids are going to see is that their city, their state, their leaders have chosen to violate federal law because they think the use of marijuana is okay, which will encourage them to visit those dealers that are already in place. They'll be more apt to visit those dealers and to face, there'll be more of them that are visiting those dealers. And so I will be supporting a ban on retail marijuana.
Any further comments?
Yes.
Councilmember Schneider.
I'm not going to try to convince anybody one way or the other. I'm just going to show a little bit of my thought process. I think back to those who have been here a while. Maybe remember former Councilman Ted Eastburn, who I got to know somewhat when he first came on, and I was acting in the Planning Commission. And I was asking him, how do you decide how to vote on these issues? And he said, Val, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you what I don't do. Is that never base a vote on the number of people that raise their hands at a council meeting. I have a hard time grappling with this being illegal on the federal level, so that's certainly swayed my vote. I have a tough time talking to an attorney that works for the state of Colorado that says this would be a terrible kind of an image to the youth of this area. I want to watch the city of Denver as they work to regulate and to see how that turns out. And maybe, yes, we could bring this back to Colorado Springs. If this motion does not pass, it doesn't mean that it can't come back. And one reason I think it might come back, the congressman from the 7th District, Ed Perlmutter, who I got to talk for a moment on a trip back to DC a couple of months ago, he has submitted a bill to change the banking law to allow those marijuana facilities to use the banks, which now they can't. I've talked with a pediatrician who explained how they see clients every day. They see the effects of kids getting into some of the edibles of the marijuana products. He sees mothers pregnant who have used the drug. And he said, Val, he says, there's no way that we're going to know the downstream cost for this. And that's true, we don't. I think if we watch out Denver as they progress, we're going to get a lot better idea of what the downstream costs are. I guess, bottom line, I'm not convinced that we need to make it more accessible for the youth here to go out and vote. So I will be voting for opting out.
Further comments? Well, having served 12 years in the legislature, and being when the medical marijuana came through, these are some of the most challenging votes we take, and it's challenging at this level also. I made a commitment when I ran for this office that 60 would pass in my district, 60% to 40%, and deciding how to position myself in my district and my race, made statements like in the Gazette that Colorado Springs needs to ban marijuana at the retail level until the enabling legislation was enacted, and once it was enacted, knowing the framework, I would honor a limited retail presence of that if it was kept away from schools, if it was not in residential areas, if it was taxed just like alcohol, and as the amendment permits, and also that we would tax it locally to create an education program to be able to encourage students not to use the product. the administrator, and we bring dogs onto the campus twice a year to make sure that no kids use it. We will continue to do that, and we will continue to make sure that nobody underage at the school uses it. It's not appropriate for them to use it, but I do have if this does not pass at this level, I have a amendment that for a moratorium that fulfills my commitment, my integrity that I made to the voters of my district. And if we do a moratorium and the moratorium does not honor those principles, then I will come back and vote to opt out also. So I will be voting against this particular provision and then see where we go from there after that. Any further comments? Okay, so the machine.
The yes vote is to opt out.
The opt-out vote passes 5-4. Colorado Springs is opted out.